Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'll give everybody a moment to log on, but we are here tonight to celebrate the release of Lark and Kasim, Start a Revolution by Kacen Callender, who is in conversation this evening with Adib Karam. I am Cassie. I am at the Novel Neighbor, which is a brick and mortar independent bookstore in Webster Groves, St. Louis, Missouri, and we sell all different genres of books and carefully curated merchandise, and we do social media recommendations, and we do mystery boxes and subscription services. So if you're not familiar with our work, welcome, and we're excited to see you virtually. And I'm going to pass it over to Kacen and Adib here in just 1 second, but first I want to introduce them. So our conversation partner tonight, Adib Karam, is the author of Darius the Great is Not Okay, which earned the William C. Morris Debut Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Young Adult Literature, and a Boston Globe Horn Book Honor, as well as a multitude of other honors and accolades. It's on, there was a fight for the staff favorite shelf it was on at our store. His latest novel, Kiss and Tell, received 4-starred reviews, and when he isn't writing, you can find him learning to do a let's jump, practicing his handstands, or steeping a cup of oolong. He lives in Kansas City, Missouri. Adib, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. And then the moment we've all been waiting for. Kacen Callender is the best-selling and award-winning author of multiple novels for children, teens, and adults, including the Stonewall Honor book Felix Ever After, and the National Book Award for Young People's Literature King and the Dragonflies. Kacen enjoys playing RPG video games, practicing their art, and focusing on healing and growth in their free time. They currently live in Los Angeles, California, and I am going to bring on Kacen and Adib. Kacen and Adib, thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Well, I'm going to pass it over to you all. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. If you are watching this and you have a question for Kacen or Adib or both of them, please leave it in the comments and we will answer it then. And have a great conversation, y'all.
Thank you so much. Definitely anyone, ask Kacen the questions. They're the interesting one here. I'm very boring. Kacen, I was so excited when you asked me to do this with you. I think I've been a huge fan of your work for basically ever. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. I am not just saying that I am a huge fan just because you just said that to me, but I really Darius the Great is Not Okay continues to be one of my favorites. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you. Well, I think we should dive right in if you're okay with this and talk about this beautiful, beautiful book. Basically, from the first page of me reading it, I really felt like the book was like a manifesto on being, and I don't know, it just bowled me over. I think that teenagers have this really beautiful ability to see the world and themselves and how it needs to change, even if they don't always get it right on the first try. And that was just evident from page 1 and every subsequent page. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to write Lark and Kasim's story?
Yeah, thank you. So the first spark of inspiration was a kind of response I'd seen to Felix Ever After. So there was a lot of overwhelming love to Felix and the book, but one thing I noticed was that Felix wasn't always given a lot of space for the mistakes that he'd made. And that reminded me of my own life and a lot of marginalized people's lives, where the more marginalized you are, the less space you have to make mistakes and learn and grow as a person before you're just deemed as unlikable, like the unlikable character or an unlikable person in real life. So Lark was born as the kind of symbol of the opposite of that, the opposite side of the spectrum, where they are a people pleaser and they just want to be liked, and it's almost kind of breaking the fourth wall at times because they're very aware that they would be an unlikable character in a story if they did anything, if they made too many mistakes. But that in itself, without them realizing that is a mistake, being a people pleaser, really trying to do what everyone else wants of them or what they think everyone else wants of them by betraying their own authenticity. And that kind of spirals out of control as they really try to learn more about accountability, authenticity, and what all of that kind of combines to mean for self-love.
I just got chills. I just feel well, first of all, anyone who's dissing Felix Ever After, they can come fight me if they need to. I love Felix. But yeah, I think, I've definitely felt that at times too with my writing and the way that people respond sometimes, of characters will do things that I literally like did myself as a teenager, and they'll be like, "This is unlikable," and I was like, "Great, that's super dehumanizing, wonderful."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mess, right? But yeah, sorry, I just was thinking, and I was thinking thoughts about Felix and Lark. And anyway, sorry, can you tell I'm a little out of practice at this? And obviously very starstruck. Anyway, back on, I did in fact prepare for this with questions, and you probably can't tell out in a YouTube land. But so Lark's a writer, and you show their like writing and kind of early publishing journey through the book. And I honestly had some like really intense flashbacks to my own time querying agents for a manuscript.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you show like their critiques from their fellows in their writing class, which I just could swear some of them came like straight from the guy in your MFA program. Why did you decide to make Lark a writer? And kind of as a sub question, how did your own experiences in writing and publishing inform their journey?
Yeah. I think that the first draft, they were not a writer. And I was really looking for a passion that they could have, because I do feel like my favorite types of characters are ones that have their own passion. So it was as I kind of like wrote the second draft and developed this whole theme around unlikable characters, playing with breaking the fourth wall, that kind of tied together that it would make sense that they're also a writer, and they're also very aware of the types of stories and books where characters like them are deemed as unlikable. So that's where that spark came in. My own writing journey, like Lark made the mistake, for example, of querying a book that wasn't finished yet. Totally did that. I don't know if this was like 10 years ago. The first book that I wrote at like 30,000 words or something. And like Lark, I also was like, let me just see what agents think. You're not supposed to do that at all. That was a big mistake, a big no-no. And I think that, yeah, other aspects, like throughout, they also receive responses from agents for their query. And a lot of those responses were responses that I received that were very like microaggression-y and very kind of like straight up racist at times, and really wanting to pull in just how unsafe society can be, like as a character and as a real person, and how that informs what some people like Lark do in order to stay safe, which is like the people pleasing. So that all kind of like ties back together again.
Yeah. As you mentioned, that one of the lines I had to like stop reading and sit with for a while is where Lark is thinking, and they say, "If I'm not safe if I'm not liked." Mm-hmm. And that was just really tied into their kind of need to unlearn this like grasping for external validation. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little more? Because it just blew me away. I had to like lay down for a while.
Oh. Yeah, this is where things become like a little bit more personal and vulnerable that I want to talk about right now. But that basically is like my own internal journey, is realizing that from the time that I was young, I feel like another line that Lark says at some point is that if you're a marginalized person, multiple intersecting identities, talk about trauma. It is a trauma to kind of be born into a world that is automatically set up against you, that has like a lot of imagery that makes you feel like you're not worthy, or a lot of like hatred against you from the get-go. So what does safety mean in a world like that? That's something that I myself have been like unpacking and learning a lot about, learning safety and authenticity for myself, regardless of the world around. So
I relate to that quite a bit. I feel like a lot of us had to learn new lessons about like safety in the world in the last 2 years, mm-hmm. Which has been, not always great. Yeah. Anyway, one of my favorite parts of the story was Birdie, who is, for those who haven't had the privilege of reading yet, Birdie is the main character in the novel that Lark's working on. And Birdie is also in the book, almost like Lark's personal Greek chorus at times, or their conscience. I loved how they were real and vivid as they talked to Lark, and occasionally Lark would even like answer them out loud, and then everyone in the room was like, "What?" It was, but Lark wasn't like delusional. They knew that Birdie was fictional, but Birdie was just so powerful to them. And it made me think of a lot of my writer friends who feel like as they're working their characters are talking to them. So I'm really curious, is that kind of how you come at writing? Do you hear your characters talk? And then second to that, where did Birdie come from?
So I'm also curious to know if you do this, if characters also speak to you. But sometimes I feel like when I'm having like writer's block or where I'm in the beginning stages of brainstorming, I'll like sit the characters down in the room and have conversations with them in my head to be like, so what is your motivation? Like, what is it that you want? What's your external goal? And sometimes they speak to me. If their voice isn't super loud, I feel like that helps me to see that things need a little bit more development. So yeah, that can be fun sometimes. The second, I knew I was going to forget. My ADHD is off the wall today. I was like, oh, 2 questions.
I know. I was like, how can I make this one question? Except they're kind of different. Yeah. Anyway, I also literally like, I will remember the first part of the first question you ask me. Everything else will be gone.
Exactly.
So to answer your question to me, I actually don't hear my characters talk to me. For me, it's almost like if I get into a really good like flow state of writing, it feels a little bit like watching them on a television program where like they're definitely not interacting with me. Like this all happened. It's all been like edited. It's, Hollywood. But I can it's like a little window in my mind. That's, I think, how it often feels to me. But yeah, so my second question is really just where did Birdie come from? Because I love them. I thought they were so cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's cool to be able to see like the scene unfolding. I feel like that flow state is the perfect moment when I feel like things are really starting to go right. But Birdie came, so the original draft was very different. It basically was written from the perspective of 2020 had just begun. So within like the first scene or so, like Lark is listening to the TV or the radio or something, and it says that there's a mysterious virus. So it's like they are on the 2020 timeline. They have no idea what's coming. And then it was as I was writing that first draft that I discovered, oh, well, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought because the characters are in quarantine. They're separated from one another logistically. That means that they can't have scenes play out together. It's difficult to make more conflict and more build more relationships. So I feel like that draft was very like tight and dry and difficult, like just very hard to work through. And then the second draft, I decided to make it what it is currently, where it's like a vaguer timeline. And with that, there was just like an explosion of like voice, of freedom, of creativity. And I think Birdie was kind of born out of that also, just kind of like my joy of getting away from what felt like very like caged in draft, just kind of like had weird and unexpected things. I think the fourth wall also started to develop a lot more. Breaking the fourth wall developed a lot more in that second draft too, along with Birdie. So I think that is where Birdie came from.
Oh, wow. So you, like, when did you actually start drafting then?
It was, I tried to remember, I'm pretty sure, it was in 2020. So I hadn't even really known how 2020 was going to end just yet. But I'm pretty sure it was more like December 2020, like January 2021.
Oh, wow. So we were definitely like in it at that point.
I was in it. Yep.
Did you, like, it was really, I haven't read a whole lot of books yet that like actually tackle what it's like to be a teen living through the pandemic. Like, were there young people you talked to about that, or like, what was your research process like for that?
Yeah, I basically relied a lot on seeing people's stories through, sorry, like a bird flew very close to my window just now. Seeing people's like voices and stories through social media. So like TikTok, like listening to people explain like what it felt like and what their experience was a huge part of it.
Oh, wow. I was in high school when the 9/11 attacks happened. And that was like a thing, but it definitely was like, it happened and then it was over. And I can't imagine, what young people went through and are still going through in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we've just decided it's over when in fact as we look around, we realize it's not over.
Yeah.
You mentioned social media, and that really helps me out as a moderator. Segueing into my question that I have for you about social media plays a huge role in this book. And I think, mostly in a negative way, as it's really something that causes Lark a lot of pain and trauma over the course of it. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to include that? And then I have a second part of the question, but I'll wait until we get through this part.
Thank you. My ADHD thanks you.
It's all good.
Yeah, I think social media ended up playing a more negative role in the book because that's where so much of the conflict sparked from. Lark, like with questions of authenticity, and a lot of like the theme around accountability versus shame, I think that is, yeah, I'm curious to know what the second part is because I might end up tying it in together with what I'm saying now.
Yeah, my second part was going to be kind of what your thoughts are about how, especially for young people, about setting healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it might be something around, because I do think social media is very positive. It's like created so much positive change. It's created so much deep connection between people. But on the flip side, it is very painful and traumatic, I think, because it has become a tool of shaming people in the as like a way of saying it's about asking for accountability, but which gets very confusing because people who are often asked for accountability then say you're bullying me, you're shaming me, and it's not the case. So it becomes like such a messy tangle of confusion, and that's what I really wanted to unpack in the story. For healthy boundaries, I think it depends on every person and what their needs are. So I can't say like what every individual would need, but for Lark and for myself, it has been like taking a major step back and realizing that authenticity doesn't mean allowing people into the internal world all of the time, and just creating that kind of that layer of safety, because not everyone deserves it. Not everyone deserves to have access to us, which is difficult as authors because ... That's a whole other conversation.
One of the main advices I give when people ask me advice, like when they're a young author, is I always tell them that they should block liberally and with abandon and without any guilt, because no one deserves online access to you. Because yeah, I mean, I grew up on the internet from a very young age. This will surprise maybe no one who sees my beautiful Optimus Prime behind me, but I started off in Transformers chat rooms.
Nice.
And spiraled from there. And I had to learn some really hard, especially when I was young, I had to learn some really hard lessons about boundary setting. So I thought it was really cool that you like really show Lark going through it. Because I feel often we act like it's a benign thing, or I think especially adults would be like, oh, the kids are on the social medias again, without giving any thought to it. So yeah. Moving on, there was another line, and I think this kind of ties in. This line that, again, I just had to like sit with for a while, which is that where Kasim says, even if everyone hates you, at least you're not betraying yourself. And it's as they're having another one of their arguments / intense discussions,
Right.
depending on how they were feeling at the day.
Yeah.
What inspired that line? I feel like it's something that I could have used hearing when I was young.
I definitely could have used it also. Yeah, and Jamal is like another character who's also a huge kind of like symbol throughout the book.
I love Jamal so much.
Yeah, they were very like hardcore, not really giving much mercy for kind of like lack of authenticity. But yeah, I think that what inspired the line was kind of like the theme surrounding the people pleasing and the lack of authenticity, and what does it mean to be safe, kind of like just trying to morph into what everyone, like I think Lark was really just trying to morph into what everyone else expected of them, or what they thought everyone expected of them. without really knowing who they were at their core self. So being able to learn who they are at their core self and not betray that became like an act of self-love. So I think that was born out of the conversations of authenticity and accountability.
Yeah, well, I thought it was fantastic. You've talked a couple times about, breaking the fourth wall, and this book was incredibly metatextual in a way that it almost felt like, almost like I've watched Shrek too many times. I was going to say like peeling open an onion.
Yeah.
But it was more like opening a gift, because even though I did get teary at some points, it definitely wasn't stinky and made my eyes water. It was beautiful, like a flower. But not only with breaking the fourth wall, but there were discussions of writing and characters and want versus need and trauma. How did that part of the book develop?
The want versus need and trauma?
Yeah, and just kind of the way that you tied in thinking about writing and telling a story with Lark, in fact, going through being in their story.
Yeah, I think it just became like layer after layer that did become really fun to play with, where they are a character in a book. And a lot of the times, what I'm seeing with unlikable, quote unquote, unlikable characters, or who people deem as unlikable, is a parallel to what I experience in my real life. So it just became like a consistent layer of kind of always going back to the symbol or the metaphor of who gets to be seen as likable in this world. And then kind of like, yeah, I think the breaking of the fourth wall became like a fun device in doing that, because it was playing with the idea of, well, this is exactly what I'm going through in my real life also. This is what humans go through in real life outside of just the racism that we're seeing, like characters, racism, transphobia, anti-queerness, all of that. Besides what we see characters go through in reviews and comments and how people react. That's all a very strong parallel to what we're dealing with in real life. So I think that just kind of became like a device that, even though what I just said was sad, it was like fun to play with.
I think it's a really weird thing when art imitates life, and even weirder when life starts imitating art. I definitely have had some like weird moments like that where I'll be writing about a thing and then it happens to me. I was like, well, this isn't, I don't like this.
In a strange way, that happens to me all of the time.
Really? Are you sure you're not Zord?
I'm pretty sure. But in Felix Ever After, I wrote about Felix finding a white cat, naming that cat Captain, and then Captain becoming his pet. And it was because I found a white cat that it was like, well, I might as well name her Captain at this point. So yeah, imitation.
Okay, that is amazing. Okay, as long as it's a cat, it's great. And it's like awful things happening, that's the worst.
Right, yeah.
So you mentioned queerness and Lark's queerness, and you really crafted what I like to call a queer normative like setting for Lark and Kasim and all of their friends and acquaintances and occasionally enemies. Can you talk a little bit about bringing queer normativity to life?
Yeah, I think I just, and it's funny because there, no hate to the copy editor who, was it the copy editor or maybe the proofreader who asked the question, but so in the book, there's like a coven of femmes, and there are characters who are mostly cis girls, but there is like one cis guy in the coven, and the person asked the question, wait, I thought this was like a coven of femmes, like why is there a guy in this? And I just was like, I'm not going to explain the answer to you or in the book, because I think that I am so used to just living my daily life without having to explain myself or explain like my identity to anyone else. And I think that that's what teens deserve also. The teens that would get that don't necessarily need to have I think it's about deciding like who's the default, and I don't think that they need to feel like they're not the default with these explanations. You get what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like when I'm reading a book and there's like a explanation of what something means, I was like, oh, this wasn't actually for me. This was for someone who
Right.
is not of, yeah.
This is for someone that doesn't know that even Shakespeare used they as a singular pronoun.
Indeed.
Sorry, if I swear, if I have to have that conversation with someone one more time, I might throw myself down a hill or something, like in The Princess Bride. It would be very dramatic and amazing.
I mean, sometimes I do see that hill roll and I'm like, that actually kind of looks fun. I wouldn't mind.
I feel like it looks fun until you start like finding all the rocks and roots in the ground, and then you're like, oh, I need to see my chiropractor. I'm not as young as I used to be.
That's a good point. Especially the not as young as I used to be.
I just feel like, I don't know if you felt like this, but I feel like the pandemic really made my age catch up with me. I was like, wow, my knees didn't used to make that sound.
My back is in a constant state of pain.
Oh my gosh, right? I used to be able to like sleep wherever, and now it's like, nope, I gotta do my ritual, I gotta do my skincare, and I need to be in my bed on the right side because that's the side where my back doesn't bother me. Like it's a thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Any young person watching this right now is gonna be like, oh, these
You know what? I hope that they know. Listen, when I was young, I feel very old right now, but when I was young, I always was like, adults, whatever, we understand we eventually get old. No, you're eventually going to get old too.
Right.
I'm officially at the age where I get to say that.
I know, right? I think it's weird. I know like a lot of people around me were always kind of nervous or afraid about getting older. And I think for me, growing up queer and brown and depressed, I always feel like every birthday that comes around is another victory over the haters. I'm like, yes, I continue living to spite you. And so I like getting older.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I feel like
I've been feeling with every age there's a little bit more peace that comes. So I'm starting to enjoy it too.
Yeah. I really hope one day I'll get to be one of those people that like has a rocking chair on the patio, assuming I ever get to own a house with a patio or just own a house in general. And I'll be like rocking there, and then I'll be like, I don't want to yell at people to get off my lawn, but I do want to yell at people. It's like, why aren't you wearing a helmet? Or, I'll give safety tips instead. I feel like that's a much more wholesome thing.
Right.
Yeah. Brush your teeth twice a day. That's important.
Drink water.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Water is so delicious. And I can't believe I'm saying that. I never would have believed it 20 years ago, but water is amazing.
Yeah.
Who knew? Oh my gosh. I'm getting completely off topic. I just have a few more questions.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about love. I feel like we've skirted around it a lot, but love is really at the center of this book, both platonic love and romantic love, and the really beautiful place where those two things kind of intersect. Can you talk a little bit about love, not only for yourself, but for others?
Yeah. So when I wrote this, believe it or not, even though it was a very depressing time, I was very much so in the headspace of Lark, and I sometimes wish I could return to that, where basically Lark does believe that every single person in the world is worthy of love. And I feel like in the book there's a lot more space to give nuance to this, but even the people who are harmful, even the people who hurt others, like to Lark, in the moments when I am super peaceful and have been meditating for like 10 days straight, that's the headspace I get into also. But the idea is that like at the core, where all our authentic selves are basically love, are made of love. We're not born into this world where we are babies like wanting to harm others. That is something that we learn from our parents, from society, the desire to like hurt others because we think that we need to be more worthy of others. And that's usually like a core of pain. There's usually like some trauma or some wound at the core of that. So from Lark's perspective, it's more like, well, the more that we all heal ourselves, the more that we'll see that we are worthy of love, and then it'll be easier to see that others are worthy of that same love, even when they are making mistakes. And that kind of like ties into the question of why is it, like back to social media a little bit, but like why is it that we enjoy being on social media so much? Sometimes it isn't about asking for accountability. A lot of times it is shaming, and I can, hopefully the book will give enough space to talk about that super nuanced conversation. But I do think there is a difference, and like why is it that we take so much joy in shaming others? Is it to get away from the wounds that we don't like or the shadows that we don't like about ourselves? So yeah.
I love that. Several years ago, I read a book called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed," which was, I think it was like a white British dude.
Yeah.
But he was studying like cases of like social media shaming and like the effect that it had on people. And the gist of it seemed to be that, well, it made certain people really miserable for being shamed, and the people that were doing the shaming didn't really come out of it any happier than they had been before. And I've tried to always keep that lesson in mind every time I move through social media. I try really, really hard to never jump on any bandwagons or tweet in anger, as they say.
Yeah. So I know what you're talking about. I have not read that book, but it was in the documentary 15 Minutes of Shame that's on HBO Max.
Ooh.
And that documentary, I wish I had watched it while I was writing the book or before I had written the book, because I feel like it would have helped me even more like give voice to what I was trying to say, because that documentary, I feel like it should be required viewing. It really explains, first of all, like not only why it is that there's such a push towards shaming versus accountability these days, how it is that we became almost like addicted to the feeling of like that glory of having, like, you know, if we are asking for accountability, there have been so many victories that it's almost like we start to look for moments where people are making mistakes so we can have more victories. But then it becomes a question of, was that even really a mistake? And the documentary goes through a lot of different examples where people were accused of things that they hadn't even done and ruined their lives. And yeah. And it goes through the history of public shaming, which when you think about it, of course, like when people were in those things, I forget what it's called, but like the head and like the, you know, kind of like ties all of that into like, we always had a glee with when it came to like shaming others publicly, and it's kind of made its way to now, you know?
I feel like maybe it's the stocks.
Yeah, maybe.
That feels like the truth. It might not be the truth. Don't at me. Okay, so this is a little more lighthearted, but at the reading your bio off, Cassie mentioned your love of RPGs. What are you playing right now? Do you have any recommendations?
I've been loving, so I do love Baldur's Gate 3, but it hasn't been officially released yet. So basically, whenever they do an update, they force you to start over.
That sounds awful. I hate losing my saves. It's terrifying.
So not only that, but you just kind of like stop and think about all the bosses you fought and won against. And it's like, do I really want to go through that again? Right now, the answer is no. So I have not been playing it recently, but I do like the game a lot. And I only play queer RPGs where there's like a queer love interest. So because of that, I've played like the basics like Dragon Age series, Mass Effect series. Am I missing something? I feel like there's another big one. Tried like Cyberpunk 2077. You know, basically just trying all of them. But there aren't so many options that I can like continue to always play. So I just tend to like go back and play them again.
That's fair.
Yeah.
My experience has been that JRPGs are intensely no homo, which they have to be because of how homoerotic they often are. So I'm like, this isn't gay, but it feels gay enough to me. Yes, let me watch all these spiky-haired twinks intensely emote at each other because they're friends.
Are you talking about Genshin Impact right now, like specifically?
I was maybe talking about Kingdom Hearts,
or that is another one.
Final Fantasies, like 4 through 10.
You see, I wish I could take that energy because I would be able to enjoy the game so much more. I think it's because there's no like option to actually make them queer. Them like, I cannot do it. You know.
Right. Yeah, it can be very intense sometimes, but I love a good JRPG. I don't know why, they just do it for me. Yeah. So my very last question for you, which I feel like is the one question every author always hates getting. But is there anything that's next for you that you're allowed to talk about?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. So everyone, you heard it here first. There's nothing to see here. But I bet there will be, and I'm sure it'll eventually be announced in the future.
Yeah.
Well, with that, that's the end of my questions. So we're going to turn it over to audience questions. Oh, and Cassie's back. Thank you. Hello. Long time no see.
I was dying at the RPG conversation. I was having a good laugh. And also, so you've been publicly shamed by John Ronson. And
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a time. I was loving that.
I feel like that's a really, John Ronson is a really unfair name to have because is it Ron Johnson?
John
Ron. Like it's three of the same. It's the same word over three times. It's terrible.
Yeah.
All right.
Out of control.
White people, I take responsibility. I have some audience questions for you all, and some are to both, some are to just Kacen. Let's hop in. Kacen, the first one that I see is what's different about writing for middle grade versus YA versus adults? Because you have books in all three genres. So,
yeah, I think it's besides the content, you know, like cursing, drugs, etc. For me, it has been about hope levels. So for middle grade, for example, I just Moonflower just came out, and that was that had like throughout it's about depression, but throughout there were characters like every single time Moon had like a depressive thought, a character would be there to have like a moment of hope. Lark and Kasim is actually kind of similar with Birdie because whenever Lark had a moment of like, oh, I'm not worthy of love, Birdie would be right there to say, yes, you are, you know. So I think it's about like always putting that kind of hope and bright light at the end of the, what am I saying? Bright light at the end of the tunnel. That's not what I meant to say. Just kind of like a bright light in the spark of darkness. For adult, I haven't written in it quite as much, but I think that I'm not as cognizant of there needing to be hope because I'm not writing for children with it in mind, where it's like when I was 12 years old, I think I really needed that hope a lot more than I did now, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And that's
very exciting. Oh, sorry, say again.
I'm saying you also write in the YA space, and I guess I'm wondering, like, why is that the genre or the age group that you gravitate towards?
I really feel like adults are kind of boring, and I say this as an adult myself. You know, I started writing when I had started writing in like 2010, but I started really seriously writing in 2014, 2015, right when We Need Diverse Books was gaining steam, and it felt like YA was really where the most exciting changes were happening, and YA was a space where there was room for me to write about people like me, like myself.
Absolutely. This is a fun question, and I think we can apply it to the two most recent books. It's open-ended, but so we could go all across. What would happen if your book characters met? So I was thinking Hunter and Lark, but I guess you could do any.
If our two, like my book and Adib's books characters met?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'm assuming that Lark would just immediately be in love with any and all characters.
I think Hunter would be extremely baffled by Lark not being on social media. He'd be like, "Wait, you deleted your profile? How do you know what's going on? How do you stay in touch with your friends? How do you get dopamine?" I think Hunter would think Lark is really cool though, and he would probably be a little intimidated, and want to like learn how to love people the way that Lark does, wholeheartedly, because I think he is isolated in a lot of ways and probably has some wounds that he needs to work on.
That's very sweet. That's a very nice answer.
But then he'd be like, "But you don't even have like a secret Twitter?" He lives way too much on social media, which is in fact part of his problem.
I mean, it's definitely a theme in both of your books, and I was interested in that conversation. It's like a huge, it centers both of these storylines. We have a question about writing process. Do both or either of you write alone? Do you work with other writers? How do you brainstorm? Are you in group chats? I always think these questions are fun.
Adib, do you want to go first?
Only if you want me to.
I do want you to.
Okay. So I mostly write alone. I'm in a couple like Discords or Slacks with other writers. In the before times, every Thursday we would have like a local writer coffee shop meetup. That doesn't happen anymore, obviously, because pandemic. But I do have like a few people that I'm in a germ circle with that probably once a month we'll gather together, and we say we're going to write, but almost inevitably we complain about publishing for 5 hours instead. I think I definitely don't brainstorm with anyone else because I don't like anyone to know my business. I don't like sharing things until I'm like confident in them, except with very, very specific people, like my agent being one of them. Like I just don't like sharing first drafts for the most part, except with like people who have maybe a financial stake in helping me make them better.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Kacen?
Yeah, I am very much a like loner writer. Do not share. That hit me because I think it took me a while to get to a place of only share when I'm confident in it and the idea, and maybe have even like already written at least one draft of it. I think I used to share ideas a little bit too early, and then it became very easy to feel beholden to that idea. It's like, oh, I told 100 people that I was going to write this specifically, so I have to write this specifically when it wasn't really what was meant to be written. But yeah, I'm a loner. I'm a lone wolf when it comes to writing. Yeah, and for a process with like outlining and that sort of thing, I feel like it changes from book to book. Yeah,
I'm kind of the same. Every beast is different. It's funny though you mentioned like telling people ideas. I once like tweeted this idea that I was like, I think I'm going to work on this next, and within like an hour, there was a Goodreads entry for this book that I'm like, I have not written. I ended up not writing it, but someone was just like, Adib's writing this book, and made a Goodreads page for it. And someone else had a different Goodreads librarian they took that page and they tweaked it and then like they retitled it. So it ended up being the page for my picture book instead. But I was like, never about ideas ever again, even idly.
That is funny.
It was so funny.
Wow.
I had a writer friend tell me that he couldn't tell people his ideas anymore because he got the dopamine rush from their like response, and then he didn't feel like he could finish it because like great idea. He's like, it is a great idea, and that was all he needed.
I actually do feel that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So funny. All right, this is a fun question. If your books had playlists, what musical artists would be on those playlists?
So I do have a playlist for Lark and Kasim.
Yeah.
On Spotify. It is called Lark and Kasim Star Revolution. I have way too much fun with these playlists. Like, yeah, I spend days just collecting songs. It's mostly like Solange, I think. It's mostly like old school R&B, new school, is that even a thing? But kind of like newer R&B. Yeah, it's like chill vibes.
I'm finding this as soon as it's over. Sorry, did you hear me?
No, I also made a playlist for Kiss and Tell. And this will surprise no one to know that it's very heavy on One Direction. Also heavy on Pink Floyd, which may be a little more of a surprise, but I think if people are as familiar with dad rock as I am, they will see the parallels, especially in The Wall, of like the feelings of isolation that can come. Also, the theme song for The Untamed, the Chinese fantasy drama, is literally the most gay romantic song ever. And so it's basically in all of my playlists because I want every book I write to make people feel the way I feel when I hear Zhao Shan and Wang Yibo singing not a love song, but it's really a love song to each other. It's
Is it called Kiss and Tell?
Oh, it's called, if you look up the Untamed theme song.
No, I mean the playlist that you made.
Oh, the playlist. I think it's on Spotify. I made it for Kiss and Tell. I think I can find the link and post it in the chat. I don't know if that only goes to us.
I can post it in the chat after. That's so fun. Okay. Yeah, if you put it in our private.
The audiobook is on Spotify.
Yes. I did find it. I'm sorry, my keyboard is so loud. I was having like wrist pains, and so wrist and neck pains because I'm getting older. So I bought an external keyboard, and it's one of those like clacky ones, and then like a little stand for my computer to get it up higher, so I'm not always looking down like this. But it makes it really obvious if I'm typing during a video call.
Yeah.
The conversation about getting older was funny. I have like at my desk at the Novel Neighbor, like this like little low to the ground chair. And today to our store owner, I was like, I think my bones are at the point where we need a real one. And laughing at me for turning over to the wall, to the dark side on that one.
As soon as you hit 30, I mean, it just all spirals.
It's all
down.
pop from there
on. Okay, so a question about what was different about writing these two recent books. You talked about how your processes were different for each of your novels. How were these ones different? I'm talking Lark and Kasim and Kacen Callender. And then also, like, were these the books that were the easiest, or like were other books like...
Oh, we lost Cassie. I think we know the question now. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
So whether it was easy, I feel like I kind of answered a little. Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry. No way. Just keep answering. I'm still here.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I was kind of talking about this earlier with the first draft being super different. And because of that, it was I think this was probably the second hardest book that I've written, that like coming back from that first draft and really like filling in new scenes. It was definitely difficult, but ADHD brain, what was the second part of that question again?
The second part, no, that's absolutely fair. The second part of that question, which of your books like came about most easily, like sprang forward?
Oh, I think King and the Dragonflies came about the most easiest, whatever. Yeah.
That was the first of your books that I read, and I really loved it too.
Thank you.
I think for me, Kacen Callender was the hardest book I have ever written. I started drafting it in like February 1st of 2020. So I was only a few chapters in when the world turned upside down. And I'm a pretty extroverted person. I really like being out and about in the world. I was excited to write about boy bands and like going on tour, and suddenly I was stuck at home. I could not go to concerts. I could not go anywhere. And I got really, really depressed. And it got worse for a while in 2021, kind of the winter, when I was in the midst of revisions, because in Kansas City we had like a really bad cold front where it was like -10 degrees Fahrenheit for a week solid, and they're like, don't go outside, not even to just like check your mail. Don't open your blinds, that will let the heat escape. There might be rolling brownouts. You never know. Just stay warm. And so that wasn't great for my mental health either. And I turned in that draft, and my editor was like, this is all really great work, but also this is a really sad book now, and you're writing about boy bands. Boy bands are supposed to be fun. Let's try it again. Make the book fun. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. This is a really depressing book. And it felt at times like I had forgotten how to write. And so I had to do my revisions, not in my office, but laying on my living room floor with One Direction concert videos playing in the background. And like, I just had to like upend every writing habit I had and to get that book done. It was like pulling teeth at times. And I'm really proud of how it turned out. But oh my God, there were times when I thought it was just never going to come together.
I'm glad it worked out for you. Yeah, laying down weirdly is like very helpful for writing, I think, because it like takes less energy than sitting up. And yeah.
It is. I find it like sometimes I'll just have a problem, and the only way I can fix it is to lay down. I'm like, oh, the answer is X, Y, and Z. I've got it.
My old person brain has been trying to figure out different positions that are like best for different things. And I like read this article about like even there's like optimum ways to write, there's optimum ways to read or to take pills. If you lean to the right, it's like 40 minutes faster for pills to absorb than to the left.
But
off topic. I
lean back.
If you lean to the right and take the pill,
it's intestinal. It's like the way that everything is shaped. Listen, this is way off topic, so I understand. But
I'm
I
really
just
curious about this now. I'm going to Google it after we're done.
I'm into it. Yeah.
okay, great. I'm glad that was well received. And then Adib, which of your books like sprang forth easiest?
The easiest one was definitely the second Darius book.
Oh yeah.
It's the only book of mine that I ever like outlined and then it stuck to the outline. It changed very little. It really was like putting on a really comfortable coat or like putting on a really comfortable pair of shoes. I wish I could have that experience again someday because it was just the easiest.
Do you feel like it was because you also already knew like Darius and you felt like the world and the characters were familiar?
I think so. I think that combined with like I really knew what I wanted to say, which is very rare for me. I usually figure out what I wanted to say somewhere in like the third draft.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew from the get-go what I was trying to do. It was very wonderful. Yeah. I'll always be chasing that high.
I know what you mean.
This is our last one of these questions, but I think it's interesting. We talk in our book clubs a lot about epistolary or mixed media books, and both of these books have mixed media elements. I think because social media and news clippings and everything else are kind of prevalent in both. What is it like writing the mixed media or like the epistolary elements? Is that fun? Is that difficult? Do those come like while you're writing the story? Do you add them in later? What's that process?
I love it. I love breaking up the kind of like expected prose. Like after a while, I think this is like my 7th or 8th book, I'm kind of like looking for ways to make it feel more creative as I'm writing and to like put in different expressions. And yeah, I really enjoy kind of like putting in text messages and social media. It also just feels more current and more contemporary, I think. So it feels more like authentic to YA.
I'm not proud of this, but I had so much fun. I don't think I've ever had I've never cackled as much as I did when I was writing fake bad faith think pieces. I was like, what's the worst possible opinion someone could have? Here it is. Let me write it out. And I was like, oh, this is why people like writing about villains. It was very liberating in a way to be like, yes, let me lean into all of the worst impulses in humanity right now. That's right. It was, yeah. I hope to never meet anyone like that, and I hope to never read anything like that. But I heard from some readers that they like got so mad about the think pieces that they were getting ready to get online and like rebut them on Twitter, and they're like, "Wait, this is a fake think piece." Good job, Adib. And I was like, "Yes, validation."
That is so funny.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap it out, we always, as Novel Neighbor, we do some quick, like, rapid questions. Some are this or that, and some are just easy. So first, this or that. Would you rather be, with no added skills to your life, would you rather be a social media influencer or a boy? like you don't actually have to have dancing and singing skills, but what would you rather be?
I didn't even hear the second option. It's the second option. Like
social media band member.
Oh.
Boy band.
Yeah.
I would definitely like being a musician. I think, I don't know if you can see, I have like my guitar, I have my lap, oh, I can't, there we are. I have my lap steel guitar there and my regular guitar further behind. I think it'd be amazing to be a musician and become rich and famous, just like Kermit the Frog.
Kacen?
Oh, I mean, musician, boy band. Anything that's not social media.
Right, you get to pay someone to do your social media. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you both have stamina than me. I don't think I could do it.
Oh. You wake up for 3 hours to do a concert, and then you can sleep the other 21 hours. It would be great.
Friends to lovers or enemies to lovers?
Ooh.
That's hard. So hard.
I would say most of what I read and enjoy most is friends to lovers. I do like a good enemies to lovers, but I feel like a lot of people make really bad choices when it comes to the power dynamics involved. I was like, I don't think it's a fine line. There's like a demilitarized zone between enemies to lovers and like abusive to lovers.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't like abusive to lovers.
Yeah. So true. Yeah, I'm still gonna say enemies to lovers because there's something so like, oh, when it is done well, just kind of the intensity of going from like the opposite end of the spectrum to what, like when it comes to that emotional range is just it's good.
I hear you both.
Yeah.
Okay, Twitter or TikTok?
TikTok.
Oh. I'm on hiatus from both right now, and it's been amazing for my mental health.
Good for you.
I know, right? I will say, I think as a writer, I like Twitter a little better because I can like write and no one has to see my face or see my really bad video editing skills.
I mean, I should say I don't actually have like an account on TikTok where I'm speaking. I just like looking at the videos. So
I get sucked into a rabbit hole. You know who I do love is I love the Pasta Queen. But TikTok always tries to show me videos of twinks, and I was like, this is not good for my mental health or my body image. I want to get out of twink talk, get me back to pasta talk. And it's like the algorithm is very insidious.
sometimes I get on the wrong side of TikTok and I just scroll through like as many Black, queer, trans people as possible, just like liking every video, like get me back on the right side immediately.
Nice.
Like comment sharing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel that. Okay, what is your coffee shop order?
Matcha lattes, and I figured out how to make that at home, so I've been a very happy person. Yeah.
What kind of coffee shop?
I'm gonna say you are not familiar with how they make the drink. So what's your like?
I will ask for a cup of hot water, and I will use the tea that I brought with me because at least I know that that will be good.
Do you bring it with you everywhere?
Yeah, I have some in my backpack.
I love
it. And it's my emergency tea supply for when I don't know the place.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. My last one, and I love ending on this question, is what are you reading right now?
Mine is kind of depressing. I've been having like a struggle with reading because I feel like it's so tied to work, and I've been needing to like take some space to breathe and take care of myself. But so I've been reading mostly like nonfiction, like The Body Keeps the Score, kind of like self-help internal growth books. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So I'm reading the Shahnameh, which may surprise people to know I've made it through this far in my life without ever reading the whole thing. So I'm doing that. That's one of my goals for this year. And I'm listening to the audiobook of Aidan Thomas's The Sun Bearer Trials, which I'm enjoying immensely.
I'm excited. It's high on my list.
That's enemies to lovers, or at least they better become lovers because the chemistry is off the charts. And I'm like, God, I hate this. Please let them kiss.
No spoilers.
I haven't found out yet. I'm just saying.
Kacen, is there anything else, Kacen, that you did not get a chance to say that you wanted to say this evening?
Thank you. Just thank you to everyone that came to join, and huge thank you to Novel Neighbor, to you, to Adib. Yeah, super grateful.
Adib and Kacen, thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you for hosting
us. For me to watch.
Thank you to Internet Land.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in. If you would like a full list of the Novel Neighbor events, you can find us online. We have stock of both Kacen Callender and Lark and Kasim. I did that backwards at the Novel Neighbor. We have book plates away soon. So you will also be able to have signed copies and do mail. So if you're not local, that's no worries. Thank you both again. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.